kind of a strange game in this way. If you simply look at the box score, you usually see in a 38-35 game these swings of momentum. There, you just saw score for score for score for score for score for score. They just kind of matched scores the entire game, and Baylor tacked on an extra field goal there in the second quarter, and that's pretty much your ball game in regards to Oklahoma trying to catch up with Baylor throughout that game. Dillon Gabriel with 3 interceptions. Eric Gray had another 100-yard game. So, what are your high points in regards to analysis? What really mattered in this one?
Mark, I think for me, along with some others, I mean, you took the game against Iowa State with a little bit of grain of salt, understanding that they are, probably the weakest offensive team in the league and one of, in the lower half in the country. But you took a little bit of positivity coming out of that game, understanding that you only gave up you gave up 13 points. You had a few interceptions in the game. You were able to, generate some turnovers, generate some plays. And so I, um, y- I was very, optimistic in terms of maybe this defense is showing signs of turning things around. And, um, and it just wasn't continued on Saturday. Baylor's not a great offensive team. Blake Shapen he's an okay quarterback. They've got a really good offensive line, and I think the most disturbing thing of all of this, Mark, is that they're still having they're still having trouble lining up correctly, which is mind-boggling at this point in the year with 9 games in, 3 games to go, that they're still I think they're still having trouble doing that. They're still having trouble adjusting to the protection. They're still having trouble being assignment sound. Point in case, there was one touchdown around the goal line, and then there was another longer rushing touchdown where Oklahoma has 2 linebackers hitting the same gap, which leaves one gap just incredibly wide open. So for a couple of really just kind of walk-in touchdowns that Baylor had in this game, and Baylor ended up having almost 300 yards rushing. Now the offense, I mean, to your point about Dillon Gabriel throwing the 3 interceptions, the offense didn't do them any favors in those 3 turnovers. I believe all of them were in Oklahoma's own territory. So giving Baylor a short field certainly um, isn't anything that's going to help things. And so I think going into this, we knew Venable's defense was a little bit more complicated than what Alex Grinch has been in the past. But I think in very fundamentally in nature, the fact that they're having troubles lining up 9 games. That's, to me, that's the biggest concern. Now, why is that? I wish we could be at practice or anything just to see, like, are they not getting the calls in correctly from the coaches? Are they not understanding, where they need to be, or where they're, kind of working to, what gaps they're in, where they need to adjust? Oklahoma was in a few situations. They were in bear defense formation, where you're going to have 5 defensive linemen, and they still couldn't stop the run. And so I think it was very clearly another step back. I think they probably, against a team that was a little bit better offensively, probably could have given up 50 or more points again, Mark. So I think, that was really, really frustrating, for me watching that game, just to see again some regression. Not that it was great, but they had went. I felt like went in a positive direction against Iowa State, but went on the other side. And then when you look offensively, you the 3 turnovers by Dillon Gabriel, all in the first half. Like I said, they were all in plus OU territory, which gave Baylor a short field, but also at the same time, the 2 of those were just bad throws by Gabriel. One threw into coverage. These 3 guys were, kind of bracketed around um, the receiver. I can't remember exactly who the one was in that situation, but 3 guys bracketed around him, threw an interception. On one of them, it was one of those where by design Oklahoma was going to have an unblocked lineman, and Gabriel should have known that before the snap, and based on the call and the defense that was on the field, and it just he threw it right in the arms of the one guy that was unblocked, and so that ended up being an interception. The other one wasn't really necessarily his fault. It was just so it's almost like this team consistently over this year, Mark, is they'll take a step forward and then they'll take a couple of steps back. And this defense, Oklahoma's defense isn't good enough to be able to overcome turnovers in their own territory. The offense is good. It's not great. I mean, it's not necessarily great or elite by Oklahoma standards over the last 10, 15 years that they've had. Um, and I think that kind of it partly, Mark, goes to the high expectations that this program has. You score 35 points against Baylor, and you're saying it's a good performance, not a great performance, um, but yeah, all those things combined, just the mistakes and the penalties. There was a penalty towards the end of the first half. Oklahoma's driving. I think Gabriel runs the ball to the Baylor inside the Baylor 10, so they have first and goal. But there's a illegal hands in the face penalty that Oklahoma has that pushes them back 15 yards. Then they end up having to miss I think it was around 50-yard field goal that they missed at the end of the half, which again took points away. So there's just a lot of mistakes that this team is making that's not that they're not able to overcome just because they're not good enough to overcome. So I mean, and I think besides those 3 turnovers, Gabriel he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great, right? I mean, he was good. Eric Gray was really, again, very solid. I think he had somewhere over 160 something total yards from scrimmage. A couple of touchdowns, went over 100 yards on the ground, had, I think, 5 or 6 catches around 60 yards out of the backfield. Marvin Mims had a comeback, a good comeback game after one of his worst games of his career. So again, just not complimentary football, which has been the norm for this team over the last 5 to 7 years. And um, again, it just kind of shows its head um, again for Oklahoma, where they're just not able to either play complimentary or do the things that they need to do to win a game close. This was very reminiscent of the Kansas State game and very in a lot of ways, just because of the fashion that they lost. They couldn't get off the field late in the game to give their offense a chance. So you kind of not necessarily go back to the drawing board since it's game 9, but then you've got 3 games again to win one. I think that's what you look at, and they're all winnable, Mark. I mean, I think all these 3 games are winnable. West Virginia's not particularly playing well right now either, even though it's on the road. Oklahoma State is not playing well at all, and you get that at home, and then in Texas Tech again isn't necessarily playing well either. So you've got 3 games that are very, very winnable, even with 2 of them being on the road. But can they do the things that they need to do? Even what you're going to get defensively, I think, at this point, right? But can you stay away from the mistakes, the penalties, the interceptions, the turnovers to give yourself a chance to win?
Yeah, because if you look at this box score against Baylor, some of the key indicators go in Oklahoma's favor. They have 5 more first downs. They're 10 of 15 on third down. Baylor's only 4 of 13 on third down. Usually that's a pretty strong indicator of who's going to win the game. Third down conversion rate, although Baylor 3 for 3 on fourth down. Oklahoma outgains Baylor by 87 yards, but they're -2 in the turnover margin. And like you say, 3 games left to win, 1 to get to bowl eligibility. And if they can't get it done on the road against West Virginia, then we do have some talking points, and Oklahoma State's another deal. They've fallen off the cliff.